Good morning, boys and girls. It's Mrs. Tarasi. Today we are going to take another look at our story, The Legend of the Bluebonnet. I hope you remember the story from the other day. If not, Mrs. Griner posted a read-aloud version of this story on Seesaw. If you would like to take a listen to the whole thing. Today we're going to be looking at parts of the story and using our story stones to help us remember story elements and to help us recount or retell the story of the legend of the Bluebonnet. Take a look at the question on the screen. This is our essential question for the whole module. What was life like in the West for early Americans? Our focusing question, which is our focus for this whole text, what life lesson can we learn from the story of Bluebonnet? Now, you can see the book on your screen there. Before we get into our content framing question, our question of the day, what is happening in this text, I wanted to take a moment and show you a map of the United States. It's a little different than a map you may have seen. Let's head over to the map. Take a look here. The title is American Indians and Alaska Natives in the United States. So we see a map of the United States here. It's very hard to read the details. I have zoomed in a bunch on different parts, but for right now I zoomed out so you could see the entire thing. There's a map of the United States. We see Canada and Alaska in the top, but there's different color codings on here. As always, when I look at a map, I go ahead and I look for the key. So I'm going to zoom in on the key, which is, it says legend right here. I love looking at maps. I just find them so interesting. All right, so let's look at that legend there. It says American Indian reservations and or off reservations trust land. So as you can see on here, those colored areas are to show where Indian reservations are. Now, as you'll learn in later years, especially in 5th grade, Indian reservations, when the United States government, when people began moving west, they forced all the Native Americans to move to these reservations. So if you take a look at the colors here, that is where the people were relocated to, were sent to, the Native Americans. So I zoomed in really close and I found where the Comanche people are. If you remember from the legend of Bluebonnet, the Comanche is the tribe that Bluebonnet, or She Who Was Alone, belonged to. So if you look, it's right here. So remember they said the flower was from Texas. Here's Texas. And here today in 2021 is where their people live. So it looks like most of their people, while they're in a much smaller area, are still right near Texas. I'm kind of interested to know what happened to them over the years from when the story of the Bluebonnet took place compared to now. You can also see that they are in the south part of the United States. They're down here in Texas. That might help explain why they were going through that drought and a little bit of the setting there. All right, now that we've taken a look at the map, I want to head back into our slides for the day so we can get into our story. As I showed you before, we were going to be coming back to this slide, The Legend of the Bluebonnet, an old tale of Texas, retold and illustrated by Tommy DePaula. Our question, what is happening in this text? So we are going to use one of my personal favorite tools you probably remember from 1st grade. You may have used them in 2nd grade, and they are called story stones. Now, never fear, if you don't have the actual story stones you use in class, let's use some substitutions. I'm going to show you what I'm going to use, and then I'm going to ask you to pause your video and gather some items so that you can use your story stones too. Here we go. Here are my story stones. So I looked around my house and I found some things that I felt represented my different story elements. So let's go over those, and then I'm going to ask you to pause your video and go collect some items. They don't have to be the same items as mine, But I do want you to find something that represents these different story elements. The point of story stones is you have something to touch when you see that story element. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be a stone. It could be as simple as a crayon. But what it does is that helps your brain say, oh, this is now that part of the story. All right, so let me show you mine. I have my LOL dolls up here in the corner. They're my characters. Next to them, I have a Monopoly house I got from our kids' Monopoly game. That's my setting. Look at the guy in the bottom left. That's the Joker, Lego Joker. I have a Lego Joker. And he represents the problem. I picked him because he's a villain. And on the right, I found a heart sticker, and that's going to represent my solution. I have my character, setting, problem, and resolution. I want you to pause your video, and I want you to go and gather these items. All right, I'm so interested to see what everyone gathered for their different story elements. Unfortunately, I can't see you, but you will be making a video for Mrs. Greiner, and I get to take a look at those on Seesaw. So now, what are we going to do with these little items that we've collected, our story stones? I want you to have them available in front of you. I'm going to read some pages back from the story, some really key parts of the story that show us our story elements. When I get to one of something that is the setting or the character or the problem, I want you to hold up that story stone. Pick it up, put it in your hand. That tells your brain, hey, this is where we meet our main character. Or, oh, I hear the problem here. Because we're going to use these to help us do a recount or a retell. Let's head into the story. Make sure your story stones are available. I'm going to begin by reading pages 1 through 9. Great spirits, the land is dying. Your people are dying too, the long line of dancers sang. Tell us what we have done to anger you. End this drought, save your people. Tell us what we must do so that you will send the rain that will bring back life. I'm holding up my problem story stone. I'm holding up Lego Joker because I hear the problem in the story. There's a drought. The people are dying. For 3 days, the dancers danced to the sounds, and for 3 days, the people called Comanche watched and waited, and even though the hard winter was over, no healing rains came. I heard the name of the people. They are called Comanche. I'm going to grab my LOL doll, my character story stone, and hold it up. I hope you're holding up yours. Drought and famine are hardest on the very young and very old. Among the few children left was a small girl named She Who Is Alone. Character story stone again. She sat by herself watching the dancers. In her lap was a doll made from buckskin, a warrior doll. The eyes, nose, and mouth were painted on with the juice of berries. It wore beaded leggings and a belt of polished stone. On its head were brilliant blue feathers from the bird who cries, J, J, J. She loved her doll very much. Soon, She Who Is Alone said to her doll, the shaman will go off alone to the top of the hill to listen for the words of the great spirits. Then we will know what to do so that once more the rains will come and the earth will be green and alive. The buffalo will be plentiful and the people will be rich again. Now, I'm going to skip ahead a few pages. We've already read this story, so I want to find another spot that's going to help us recognize where our story elements are. I'm going to skip to this part, after the shaman returned. I have heard the words of the Great Spirit, he said. The people have become selfish. For years they have taken from the earth without giving anything back. The Great Spirit said the people must sacrifice. We must make a burnt offering of the most valuable possession among us. When this sacrifice is made, drought and famine will cease. Life will be restored to the earth and to the people. I'm holding up my heart sticker. I'm holding up my solution. It hasn't happened yet, but now we know what the solution to this problem will be. I'm going to go to this page. Everyone that is, except She Who Is Alone. I'm holding up my LOL. I'm holding up my character story stone. She held her doll tightly to her heart. You, she said, looking at the doll, you are my most valued possession. It is you the Great Spirit wants, and she knew what she must do. This one. I have my solution ready. She ran to the place on the hill where the great spirits had spoken to the shaman. Stars filled the sky, but there was no moon. "Oh, great spirits," she who was alone said, "here is my warrior doll. It is the only thing I have from my family who died in this famine. It is my most valued possession. Please accept it." Solution, right there. Then gathering twigs, she started a fire with a glowing fire stick. The small girl watched as the twigs began to catch and burn. She thought of her grandmother and grandfather, her mother and father, and all the people, their suffering, their hunger, and before she could change her mind, she thrust her doll into the fire. I have my solution again. She looked out over the hill. The flowers. Solution, you could hold up your character too. I went to this last page because I feel like this is the first chance we get to actually hear them say what the setting is. And every spring, the great spirits remember the sacrifice of a little girl and fill the hills and valleys of the land, now called Texas, with the beautiful blue flowers. I have my story stone, my little Monopoly house. That's my setting, even to this very day. That was a very quick run through of this story. If you'd like to hear the full thing on your seesaw, I believe you can hear a read aloud of the entire story. I just wanted to pick out a few points so that when you did a retell or used your story stones, you knew where to hold them up and you knew just what to do with them. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take those story stones and we're going to put it into writing. So I'm going to add it on our chart here. Here is our story stone story map. I'm going to start with the setting. I hope you remember I held up my story stone and it said Texas. I'm going to head down to characters. I see my little LOLs down here. We said the name of the people. They were the Comanche people. And then our main character, she who is alone. Over here is our problem. Joker. We heard that at the very beginning. We heard the problem at the very beginning. There is a drought. People are dying because there is no rain and no food. What was our solution? Oh, I could say this in a few words because I remember using my solution story stone. I remember touching that several times in the story. There's a couple of things. We learned that the shaman said the people had to give up their most valued possession. I'm having a hard time spelling that, so I'm going to do that. And then I learned that she who is alone gave up her doll. There we go. Look at the story element chart. I put a little picture of my story stone so you could see exactly what to do. Here, I see my setting, Texas. My characters, the Comanche people, and she who is alone. Problem, there's a drought. People are dying because there's no rain and no food. And our solution? The shaman said the people had to give up their most valued item. She who is alone gave up her doll. So now we're going to use that story map. You're going to use your story stones to do a retell. I have it here in sentence frames. This is what you're going to record. However, you're not going to put the words that are in the parentheses there, like setting. You're going to put in the words that you know from our story element chart and from your story stones. It starts in Texas when the Comanche people had a terrible drought. There was no food and no rain. Then, the shaman talked to the great spirits. He told them that people had to give up their most valued item. Finally, she who was alone gives up her doll, and rain comes to the people. The land is saved. All right, I took our story stones chart and I put that into sentences. That is what I'm going to ask you to do today on Seesaw. I'll post this video and I'll post your assignment.